Creating characters. How to describe character clothing in your novel. You might be wondering, why is this important and why is this something that I should consider when writing my novel? All I have to say is things like, the man's tie is blue. It's not that essential. Hi, my name is LaSalle Murray from Now Novel, and today I'm going to be teaching you the importance of writing effective clothing descriptions in your novel. Character clothing can tell us a lot about a character. Their status, era, cultural affiliation, or even their identity. Understanding how to describe clothing effectively will help you create richer and fuller character portraits. Tip number 1. Use clothes to show status and position. Think of your character's clothes like costumes in a play. Costumes in plays or in movies can tell you a lot about characters, the same way that it can be done in your novel. Let's take a look at this extract from Love in a Time of Cholera by Gabriel Garcia Marquez and how he compares and contrasts character status through what they wear. Later on, we're also going to be looking at a visual comparison of the newest series, Bridgerton, and the two main protagonists, Daphne and Simon. Now let's go back to the extract. Although it was not customary for invitations to request special attire, least of all for a luncheon in the country, the women wore evening gowns and precious jewels, and most of the men were dressed in dinner jackets with black ties, and some even wore frock coats. Only the most sophisticated, Dr. Umbino, among them, wore their ordinary clothes. Forgive me if I am butchering the name Umbino, but here you can see in this extract that it is significant how the way that the characters are contrasted by what they dress. Dr. Umbino wears plain clothing, which actually shows that he has a greater status among the characters because he doesn't need the approval of others by what he wears, rather by what he does. And the other characters are trying to show status by what they wear. Tip number 2. Build or break down character expectation with clothing descriptions. What would you think of a character if they primarily shopped at thrift stores and didn't wear any flashy items, but they were actually very wealthy? Or, in comparison, what would you think of a character if they wore all of the latest designer clothes, flashy items, but they were greatly in debt? What are the backstories and character motivations that you can imply using what they wear? Maybe the wealthy person doesn't necessarily value flashy items, or they don't really care about their appearance. And perhaps the broke person feels validated by having everyone around them think that they are wealthy. Or they could have a shopping addiction. Through this, you can really play around with the character's public image and their private truths, using what they wear. The third tip is describing clothing that contrasts characters' personalities. I'm going to be using the visual reference that I spoke about earlier, Daphne and Simon, the two main protagonists from the Netflix series Bridgerton. As you can see, Daphne always wears lighter, more delicate colors, florals, light blues, greens, and beige, whereas Simon, her love interest, mostly wears black, dark reds, and grays, since he is portrayed as a bad boy, dark horse kind of man, while Daphne is an innocent and kind diamond of the first water. Color choices in the costume design were conscious decisions to show their personalities and demeanors as characters, and also how they differ from one another. The choice of costuming emphasizes the good girl and bad boy trope. You can use these characters' clothing as a reference or an exercise to really visualize contrasting personalities. Think about these two characters. How would you describe what they are wearing, and what does this say about them? Try this out, and you can apply this to any future character that you're writing. Tip number 4. Show clothing to avoid over-relying on telling. Clothing description is useful in a story because it helps you give additional information about a character that you might otherwise tell. For example, if a character is going on a date, you could write, Jem wanted to look sexy for her date, but not too sexy, so she changed into more comfortable clothes. However, you can show and imply character intention without spelling it out. They'd agreed to meet downtown at 6. At 5:45, Jem pulled off the low-cut top Emma had wolf whistled and clapped at when they'd met for their usual weekend catch-up. Make them earn any side of skin, Aunt P always said. Jeans and a tee it was. Why this arguably works better is because the details of Jem getting dressed can show us a lot of things about her. The last-minute change of outfit could show an indecisive nature. We also get to see the contrasting reactions between her friend and her aunt. The fact that Jem decides to go with her aunt's advice could show that she either values her aunt's advice more than her friend, or because she feels shamed and compelled to be good because of her aunt's adversary words. There is simply more characterization, not only of Jem, but also of the other important characters in the story. Tip number 5. Changing your character's clothing to highlight character development. As we've spoken about earlier in this video, clothing is a great way to show a character's personality traits and reveal a lot more about them. This also applies to a character's progression. As we've seen before, you can use clothing to show a character's status, and therefore imply that they have gone from rags to riches, or from riches to rags. I am probably going to butcher this name, so please forgive me. If you take the book Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. If you take the novel Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, in this the protagonist Katerina Ivanovna. In this, Katerina, her husband gets trampled by a horse carriage and dies, which leaves her with no fortunes and no prospects. She uses the last bit of money that was gifted to her for the funeral, and at this funeral, her landlady, Amalia, arrives in a very fancy dress. The table was properly laid at the time and fixed, and Amalia Ivanovna, feeling she had done her work well, had put on a black silk dress and a cap with new mourning ribbons and met the returning party with some pride. This pride, though justifiable, displeased Katerina Ivanovna for some reason. Katerina is affronted by Amalia's new fine dress, which shows her pride, where Katerina is left impoverished with children to take care of. Amalia's dress comes off as insensitive and malicious to her. Amalia's new dress therefore acts as a contrast to Katerina's downward spiral. Finally, using clothing to recreate an authentic setting. Clothing really helps to create an authentic sense of time and place, especially within historical fictions, period dramas, and fantasies, and it really helps your reader delve into the world that you are creating. If you're intending to create a historical piece of fiction, you really want to do your research before writing. Find out which colors would have been in fashion, what jewels would people have worn, what was unacceptable at that time. Doing your research on clothing can really help you create a very rich and detailed piece of fiction. And especially with fantasy novels, clothing can really help you create this magical world. Clothes really help us to picture the character and to picture the world around them. You might think it's a minor detail, but it really adds so much richness to the story that you're creating and helps you to show so many traits of the characters and their surroundings. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. That is it for today. I have included down below the blog post that talks more about character clothing and description. In summary, we have covered 6 ways to create more intriguing characters using clothing description. So keep these 6 things in mind while writing. 1. Use clothing to show status and position. 2. Build or thwart character expectations with clothing. 3. Use clothing to compare and contrast characters' personalities. 4. Show clothing to avoid over-relying on telling. 5. Change characters' clothing to highlight character development. And finally, number 6, use clothing to recreate authentic setting.